running while you guys are talking.
David, do I need to go by that clock? I think it's 1:30, right?
Mine should be accurate. It's 1:31. Okay. I'm going to ask Liam. If he's
Liam, are you ready?
Second story apartment.
No problem.
It's like Wonder Woman.
It's awesome.
Then I felt bad for her because my cousin went and bought pizzas for us all. She was getting ready for a competition, so
Oh,
she
no.
could not eat any carbohydrates whatsoever.
Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Planning Commission meeting November 7th, 2024. This time, if we can all stand for a moment of silence in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Christopher Poole. John Moody.
Here.
Matthew Munns.
Here.
Derek Motlitz.
Here.
Chris Williams.
Here.
Chairman Charles Gray. Vice Chairman James Girardi.
Here. Okay. The Planning Commission is appointed by the Board of County Commissioners. We meet twice a month. The Planning Commission holds public hearings and transmits to the Board of County Commissioners recommendations on rezonings and conditional use requests. The Planning Commission is the final decision-making body for special exceptions, certain appeals, variance requests, and certain alternative standard requests. However, final decisions may be appealed to the Board of County Commissioners. The Planning Commission also serves as a local planning agency, and as the LPA, this body makes recommendations in regard to consistency with the adopted Pasco County Comprehensive Plan of proposed comprehensive plan amendments and land development code amendments. If anyone is in opposition to any comprehensive plan amendment, land development code amendment, rezoning, conditional use, or any item where the Planning Commission transmits a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, it is important that you attend the appropriate Board of County Commissioners meeting. And if you've got questions, staff can help you, direct you to the dates for the upcoming board meetings for said items. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone, please make sure you silence all electronic devices. And for those who are attending virtually, please mute your microphones while not speaking. There's no minutes to approve today, so I'm going to move on to the public comment period. If there's anybody here to speak to anything that's not on the agenda today, now would be your time. I want to go ahead a couple things before we start that. And this goes for if you're speaking on any item, when we request that when you address the Planning Commission and the LPA, please do not direct comments at the planning directly at any of the commission members or team member, but rather directed at the issues at hand. This provides mutual respect between the commission members and the public. Okay, and also, if you plan to, a couple things, approve a publication first.
The items are advertised in the Tampa Bay Times on August 21st, 2024, and October 23rd, 2024, and by certified mailings and site postings.
Okay, thank you. And if anybody here is planning to give testimony today, please stand so you can be sworn.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give is the truth, so help you God?
Okay, so at this time, public comment for anything not on the agenda today. When you come forward, please state your name and address for the record, please.
My name's Michael Poltorek, 9152 Kenton Road. This is not an agenda item. Do you have the PowerPoint flood regulations? No worries.
I don't think so, because it's just a presentation.
It's not really, you don't have to receive it while during public comment.
All right. Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm speaking here for all of the residents of Pasco County, all the frustrated residents, the thousands of flooded out residents on the east side of the county. And there's an unfair situation that's been happening. First, I want to point out the 2024 Florida statutes, 163-3202. This specifically addresses land development regulations. Number 2 says local land development regulations shall contain at a minimum the use of land and water for those land use categories included in the land use element and ensure compatibility of adjacent uses. This is the county organization in intergovernmental relations. This is from the state. This gives the issue to you, not the state. One of the main reasons here is to regulate areas subject to seasonal and periodic flooding and provide for drainage and stormwater management. I point that out because Pasco, LDC, or Building Code 1104 says the special flood hazard areas of the county are subject to periodic inundation which may result in loss of life and property, health and safety, etc. Disruption of commerce, of governmental services, extraordinary public expenditures for flood protection and relief, and in the next section, flood losses are caused by cumulative effects of obstructions in floodplains, occupancy in flood hazard areas by uses vulnerable to floods, or hazardous to lands which are inadequately elevated, flood-proofed, or unprotected from flood damages. Now, the objectives here is to restrict use and minimize public and private losses due to flood conditions. The third objective is to control the alteration between natural floodplains, stream channels, etc. I could read all of this to you, but you have it. FEMA says special floodplains are any area that has a 1% chance of flooding or a 100-year floodplain. Here's your FEMA definitions. I also recognize Senate Bill 102, which is housing, which is the Live Local Act. However, the Live Local Act, while it says you cannot stop rezoning for residential of multifamily, it does not say in here that we have to roll over on floodplain management or stormwater management plans for the properties. I have been here for 5 years explaining to you guys, we do not have a countywide flood management plan. Now your residents are about to have the Army Corps come in here and figure out how many bypass canals, drainages, pump stations it's gonna take to fix the fact that since 2012, when the FEMA regulations were acknowledged and absorbed by the county, the developers have not been forced to protect their neighbors. Adjacent uses is the current neighbors. These developers, by these definitions, should be held to a 100-year storm because we need to understand that the 100-year storm does not come during the dry season. It comes during the existing wet season. So the ground is already saturated with water. The water doesn't permeate. I'm not going to insult you with pictures of developments. We all know they go up 10, 20 feet, and you don't want to be their neighbor. But the problem is, this is the most sensitive piece of the connected city. This is the Kenton MPUD. This is the north part right here. Right here is where you're going to put a 4-lane road, and in that flooded section, 106,000 square feet of commercial. This is dangerous. Where is the water supposed to go? This right here, to the right, that little dry section is where the road's going to be. This is from the south looking forward with your plans that have been submitted to you. The red line is the edge of the 4-lane paved road and the easement. All of the commercial is supposed to be on the south side of that red line. The flooding that we had a couple of weeks ago, on this topo map, everything that has purple lines on it was flooded. The floodwaters went to 104.5 feet. The red line is the edge of where the road's going to go. The 106,000 square feet of commercial is all in what flooded. This is an issue now like it's never been before because of the media and because of emotions. We don't want to stop development. We don't want to stop future neighbors from moving in. We've been pleading with you for 5 years to please develop a countywide storm water management plan. We need this before any more developments are allowed to come in, increase density, change comprehensive views, or get elements of the current plans approved to benefit developers to make it cheaper or faster to build. We need your help. This is on behalf of all of your residents. Please meet us in the middle and protect us, your current residents. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, anybody from the dais want to address that, or?
Well, let me start by saying there's no obligation for you to
Okay,
address
very
public
good.
comment, but I mean,
No
if
worries.
anybody wants to comment, they can. It's up to you all.
May I ask the gentleman a question? In your opinion, what is a county-wide stormwater management plan? Our land development code contains stormwater regulations which do regulate up to the 100-year flood. Our land development code and the conditions of approval of all developments in this county require permits from the Water Management District, whose regulations in 62-330 also require management and storage of surface water, stormwater, up to and including the 100-year flood, and including mitigation of impacts to flood plains. So there are regulations in place. Florida was one of the very first states in the United States to adopt a comprehensive set of stormwater regulations. We have some of the most stringent stormwater regulations of any state in the country. Not saying we have the most, but it's one of the most. So I'm curious, what is it that you have in mind for a plan? There are regulations that do control to make sure that development does control stormwater runoff. So I'm curious, what things do you think need to be added to those regulations?
Thank you for the question, and more importantly, thank you for allowing me to answer, because normally in public forum, once the 3 minutes is in, thank you for allowing me to go past 3 minutes, because these are very valid issues, and we've got to start talking about them. Let me answer on 2 fronts there. The first is on very close to an agenda item. I believe it's going to be the second one. I'll be back up here speaking about it. Very close to that is the stormwater management facility. One of the issues that's very important right now is the King Lake drainage basin, okay? All of the homeowners on the west side are flooding out, and all of those floodwaters that you saw The next presentation will have pictures of 3.5 feet of water over our road. Nobody could get in or out. The neighbors took care of neighbors, okay? Catty corner to that, and before Elam was built, we proposed doing an overflow to the basin that would go to the stormwater management facility. That in itself would have protected and captured the excess water, and this connected city that we're putting into place, by all means, we could have put reclaimed water into the infrastructure and sold that water back to the residents and the businesses. The reason I say it like that is because that drainage basin is a clay bottom. There's no spring. The water isn't going anywhere. So all of the water that's captured there, it's stuck. It has to go somewhere. When the agenda item comes up, I'm going to be able to show you where it's going to and the real issue with one of these projects. But the second issue and the frustrating part for us is every time I've been here to speak on a new project, the argument is given back to you, well, we're following state building codes. State building codes are a minimum for the state. Pasco County is a higher risk flood area because this was all cattle pastures. This is cattle pastures. And now we're putting high density developments on cattle pastures. So when we cover the surface with non-permeable roofs, foundations, driveways, roads, or the shedding of water into retention ponds, there's a capacity limit. And the reason I say that is because the argument that's been given back to this board repeatedly, this commission, is, well, we're holding the 24-hour formula. And developments have refused to exceed that to protect their neighbors from what we all know is really the 100-year storm during the wet season. If we have 3 afternoons in a row of thunderstorms, we all know there's water pillowing everywhere. We'll take 2 days of storms and then any rain event. And the reason I wanted to point out the neighbors, adjacent uses, property, health, life, is because I have the exact number on my phone. But fire rescue had to do 2,000 evacuations during Milton. They had to do 188 rescues. That has not only flooded out thousands of our neighbors, which at this point in Dade City and Zephyr Hills, if it's our older population, they're on fixed incomes. Their house payments are low enough to where they can live the rest of their days. They cannot afford the cost of new construction to rebuild and pay back loans at 6.5% and live in those homes. I have heard from countless homeowners that have now decided they're going to slap new drywall in and sell, and they have to go somewhere else because they can't afford to rebuild what they had. That's not fair to our current residents.
I understand the concern, and we're all very sympathetic to the flooding that resulted from the back-to-back hurricanes. But to my question, what type of plan is it that you envision or would like to see? The one thing, I practice stormwater for a living, okay? And we follow those regulations, and I've been doing this for 30 years. What level is enough protection? Right now, depending whether you're in an open drainage or basin or a closed drainage basin, the level of stormwater protection is a 25-year, 24-hour storm or a 100-year, 24-hour storm. Or if you're familiar with the Florida Department of Transportation, if you're draining into one of their facilities, you're required to look at 48 different storm events, all the way from the 2-year, 1-hour storm to the 100-year, 10-day storm. At what level do you perceive is enough protection? Do we look at the 100-year storm, the 500-year storm, the 1,000-year storm, 40 days and 40 nights of rain, and we gather up the animals and put them on the ark? I'm not trying to be funny. It's that we have to make a balance of what is an acceptable level of protection. I'm not saying that the regulations that are in place provide enough or don't provide enough, but I'm trying to get a feel from you as to what you think is enough. I'm sure that the community is going to have a discussion and a debate, and probably the state is probably going to look back at its regulations and say, well, maybe we should be looking at not just 24-hour events, but multi-day events. And I will tell you, in my own experience, it's not usually the one-day event that's a problem. It's usually the 3 or 4 days of rain in a row. You know, we can have that, and unfortunately, what we saw in Milton was rainfall amounts that came in an extremely short time. So we talk about a 100-year storm in our area is generally 12 inches of rainfall in a 24-hour period. In Milton, there were areas of the county that received 16 to 18 inches of rainfall in a 4 to 6 hour period. That's an unprecedented event that no one could have ever contemplated. And I'm not suggesting the regulations can't be better, but what level of protection is it that you think we need?
First off, I want to thank you, because you have always been constructive and positive whenever I'm up here speaking with you guys. So first off, I want to say thank you, okay? Because I believe a lot of these conversations are going to have to be constructive, all right? Not you, some of your peers in the past have asked me where I got my civil engineering degree from, and I don't have one. I'm not an engineer, okay? I am finishing up my 3rd master's degree, and I've got a doctorate in common sense at this point, okay?
Well, you're speaking intelligently about the subject, so it counts.
So I try to bring some objective stance here, okay? Common sense tells me that when the environment is changing, okay, that however it is we're looking at things, maybe we should consider sliding that scale or making improvements if we have proof that what we are permitting developments to abide by is now threatening our current county. Now, when I say that, what I'd like to give you as an example is I have several neighbors here, all right? Before the hurricane, just from 2 afternoons of rain, what I want to tell you is this gentleman lost his foundation of his home, and we didn't even see a hurricane. That's just from afternoon thunderstorms. We don't have to talk about a 100-year storm. And I'm sure it's going to be a little emotional when we talk about Timber Pines, because that one's going to have an effect on this gentleman. But if we can give you examples currently that don't involve that hurricane, or 12 or 16 or 18 inches of rain, we already know there's a problem. And so I really think that it's time, in a positive, constructive way, that maybe we need to reevaluate the standards that we're holding new developments to. Because currently, with what we're using, they're flooding out their neighbors. We've got linemen whose homes are still underwater that aren't even in a flood zone, right behind the YMCA in Zephyr Hills. We have residents that will not make it back to their homes to find out that they're never going to live in them again for 2 more weeks. And while you're much smarter than I am with stormwater, much smarter than I am. But that rain came in 4 to 6 hours. Many of these people didn't start flooding until 2 to 4 days later when that water stacked up. That tells me that the 4 hours, if it would have been over 12 hours or 24 hours, was still the same amount of rainwater that flooded them up 2, 3, 4 days later. So we're asking you, please, can we maybe tap the brakes on some development and figure out how to protect our current residents?
Yeah, I think the big thing to delineate between here is the event that we saw with the storms and what's happening. Obviously, that's the most painful event at the forefront of everyone's memories. But, you know, again, that's arguably one of those 100-year storms, or maybe even a 500-year storm, we don't know. But I think that the key is to look at what was happening before then. If we are getting problems within these developments on afternoon thunderstorms, that's something that should be regulated and should be fixed. you know, although this is kind of a painful subject right now because of the storms, it's probably not a good example to use when it comes to talking about what's happening. Because a lot of what happened with that storm, you just couldn't design for. If you could, it would make development so expensive that nobody could buy the homes. And
Yes, sir. And again, just as an example for the everyday example, out of the last, 8 weeks, our road has, and it's a very used public road, okay? Our road's been washed out all but maybe 10 days in the last 8 weeks,
I don't even think that's true.
okay?
It's still going to even cost. Right?
I got, yeah. So there's parts of the county where regardless of hurricanes.
the big
and
part of
again,
what's going on right now is the watershed from other basins that are, you know, it takes a long time for that water to move through a flat piece of land out to the Gulf. And
Yes,
so that's why we're seeing that, because there's so much rain that was dumped on that.
And it may
state.
call for drainage canals. It may call for pump
So,
stations.
Those are,
Other places deal with
so
this.
those, well, but those are interesting concepts. So, back in the 1960s, the Army Corps of Engineers, in its infinite wisdom, decided it was going to drain the swampland in Florida too, and it came and it straightened out the Kissimmee River, and we managed to dehydrate and destroy the Everglades.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now we've just paid billions of dollars to put all the curves back in the Kissimmee River. At one time, the brilliant Army Corps of Engineers came in to decided we're going to, up near Inglis, dig a canal across the state of Florida so that we can get barge traffic through. Okay? And what was the result of that? Saltwater intrusion into the
aquifer.
Floridan aquifer.
Yeah.
So I'm not convinced that the Army Corps of Engineers is Pasco County's great savior, or that, and I would tell you that current federal and state regulations don't actually allow us to do projects like straightening out the Kissimmee River or to dig drainage canals. I don't know if you're familiar with the drainage in South Florida. The South Florida Water Management District is a series of canals that lead from those swamps out into the Atlantic Ocean. You couldn't get a permit today. You couldn't get a federal permit today to do something like that. So although I hear you, and it may be what we maybe perceive as common sense, there are still federal laws that prohibit us. But Lord, this county took 14 years to get a permit to build, from the Army Corps of Engineers, to build Ridge Road.
It's longer than that, it's close to 20 years.
Okay, so
It's close to 20 years.
they're not, I think the point I'm trying to make is, I know we want to get rid of the water, and it sounds like digging a giant ditch out to the Gulf is the most expeditious way we achieve getting rid of the water. But trying to get permits and approvals for these things are not something that's simple. It takes millions and millions of dollars and sometimes decades to try to do. So there are not any simple, easy answers. Are there things that we can do to try to reduce stormwater runoff? Sure. Maybe we can require less impervious surface and more green space, but you know, we all create to stormwater runoff too. How many of your neighbors move into a subdivision and they've got a 60-foot wide lot, and we're in here debating the width of lots all the time, and they've got a 2-car garage, and then they've got 2 high school students with cars. Now all of a sudden I need to widen my driveway, and I concrete my driveway. Or when I moved into that subdivision, I didn't have a swimming pool, and then I put in a swimming pool and a big concrete deck around there. I didn't have sidewalks around the side of my house, and now I paved the side of my house. I go into neighborhoods like Gulf Harbors, and people have pavers from their house all the way out to their neighbor's property line, and the next neighbors put pavers in all the way on their side of the house. All this stuff contributes to stormwater runoff too. So it's something that we all have to be aware of. Every time each of us creates an impervious surface, we're adding to that problem. I'm not telling you that development doesn't contribute stormwater runoff, but we all do. It's just like we all generate trash and we all generate wastewater. So everybody needs to keep that in mind too when we want things of convenience around our own homes. But I'll be looking forward to the discussion on the MPUD that's on the agenda. I had planned on pulling that, and I have questions about the stormwater too, so I'm sure we'll have a nice discussion.
Thank you.
And thank
Just
you for
wait,
bringing the
well,
topic
Sir,
up.
one piece of advice.
Yes, sir.
If you give the speech to the board, don't suggest that Pasco County's rolling over on the Live Local Act.
Is
Because
that what, I couldn't hear you, I'm sorry.
you made a comment,
Oh, about live locally, yeah.
I don't have your full presentation, but you probably pull it back up.
You referenced the Live Local Act in your
Yeah,
presentation.
we're taking live local very seriously.
Maybe,
Maybe repeat your comment, I don't forgot what you said about it, but it sounded like you were suggesting that Pasco County's rolling over for it.
no, not on any level. I understand that's a very,
I think he was
very
suggesting that
touchy
although the
issue.
live local,
It shouldn't allow developers to roll us on stormwater protection, is all I said. I didn't,
Okay,
there's
well, I
no
just-
kickback
I
on one or
understood
two.
what you meant.
Yeah, just, that's probably your point, but just so you know, Pasco County is not allowed a single Live Local Act project, period,
Then I applaud Pasco County,
in Pasco County.
yeah.
In fact, our board has threatened to sue any developer that tries to use it.
And you know that I'm in those meetings also. I applaud Pasco County for fighting it for many reasons, but it is still state statute. And the issue is, it doesn't tell the county they have to approve the development plans as submitted if it doesn't handle its own
I agree
stormwater.
that even
That's
a
all.
Live Local project would have to comply with our stormwater regulations.
Yes, sir.
But
It scares a lot of people.
my only point is that they'd have to get in the door to even invoke the to even submit a project to have that be a problem. And Pasco County is not even letting them in the door. So just by
Yes.
way of knowledge, or just so you. My plan is,
Yeah. There's
if
a lot
I
of
were you,
residents.
if I were giving this presentation, I'd stay away from that. I'd just focus on the stormwater stuff.
There's a lot of residents that have been told by county representatives that that's one issue that the county is handcuffed on, and it has given to many of us, it has really given the image that the county doesn't have a choice to roll over on it. And I applaud the county for everything it's doing on that issue. I've been here, I've heard Commissioner Waitman talk about it. I know how passionate he is about it. And I applaud the BOCC and the county as a whole for that. Because we do need employment and we need other issues besides just high-density housing.
Okay. I wasn't sure how much of an understanding you had about it since you brought it up, but it
Yes,
sounds
sir.
like you do, so.
Thank you, sir.
And
Thank
I'd
you,
just like
gentlemen.
to add that you're obviously involved and paying attention, as a lot of other people that are here as well. Pasco County's in the process of updating the stormwater master plan that they've got, which is through Public Works, and there's a consultant doing it, and I just looked at the scope of that. It does include watershed management plan project review. So that's, looking at the schedule, I think it's July of next year is supposed to be when they bring the results of that to the public. Given what has happened in the middle of this study, I'm sure the board's gonna be more critical of that study, but keep an eye on that too, as input there is gonna be, I think, invaluable.
So could I make a suggestion? Especially with the Pasco Connected City, many of us feel, and I've had county representatives also say this, okay, that there's so much happening and so many approvals and so many zoning amendments and so many individual projects that the project as a whole has literally morphed all over the place, and we've collectively lost sight of the project as a whole, making sure that everything works
Cohesive.
with everything. And if there's, if I could just make a suggestion, for those that are involved with the Pasco Connected City, it is far beyond time to have an actual public workshop on that project. Because when that project was originally brought to the Planning Commission and went to the national level to present and get its pretty awards, it was supposed to be a community that would make Lake Jovita jealous. And I'm watching, and I'm seeing a heck of a lot of warehouses and light industrial that keeps being put in these zoning amendments. And warehouses don't look to me like the South Tampa project we were promised. They just don't. When the connected city turns into 2 million square feet of distribution space, that tells me semi-trucks, heavy lifting, and moving of things, it doesn't reflect in my mind the South Tampa vibe that was gonna make Lake Chavita jealous.
Yeah, Michael, just to keep things moving, if we're just connected city, if we can just table, we're gonna talk about that here at length here and real shortly when we get to
I
item 2.
will tell you that some of your comments
Right.
are issues that are going to get discussed in that
Correct.
particular project.
Good,
so.
and thank you.
And we do appreciate you coming out today. Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else here for public comment on anything not on the agenda?
Nancy Hazelwood, 34110, a nice place. I want to echo the gentleman who's up here. I think he has some important points. I'd like to say it might be prudent at this time to put some applications on hold until we figure out exactly where that flooding would go. And to your question about what we can do, maybe we need committees together with SwiftMud and our county to figure out what it is. Or maybe we need to not develop in those places that we are needing, that are flooding right now. I know some of these places have flooded 3 or 4 times, and that should be a clue also. If you did that, I think it would show your citizens how much all the boards in Pasco County do care about them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'll arm wrestle you for it. Come on. Lisa Moretti, 16331 Iola Woods Trail. And I want to echo some of what Michael said. It appears, we keep saying every year, this is unprecedented, this is unprecedented, this is unprecedented. And yet, every year it keeps happening that it's unprecedented. I believe that maybe what we need to do is look at what are happening with our weather patterns. It seems like we are entering a new cycle of weather patterns. I know that they do go in cycles, although I'm not a weather expert. And some of the things that we have used as our ordinances and regulations and our codes are not keeping pace with what is happening with our planet, basically. And when we were talking just a little bit earlier, you were talking with Michael about, yeah, it's a 100-year storm, it's a 500-year storm. He was talking also about people that went through Debbie and took a lot of water and their house floated off their foundation. And that isn't a cause of the hurricanes. We also are looking at, yeah, the folks on the West Coast took it hard with Helene, and we took the brunt of Milton. But in between those two things, it doesn't all get lumped together. And we've seen the water trying to figure out how to get home, and it can't find its way home because we've changed the topography. We've changed the way that water moves. If you look at it as almost like a capillary system, we've completely cut off a lot of the capillaries. We're also damaging our wetlands. Those are our kidneys for our aquifer. So we're creating tons and tons of problems because we're moving so fast. And so I would hope that you would consider recommending that we slow down our growth. I know I said that all throughout my campaign. I'm going to say it again. We need to slow the irresponsible growth because everything's being looked at as it comes to you in isolation. And instead of being able to see the larger picture of what's happening and how it's impacting all the way around, we just keep saying, oh, this project, okay, yeah. This project, okay, yeah. But we aren't looking at the big picture, and that's what's going to trip us up. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Rodrigo Helveston, 11341 Rosier Lane. Basically the same thing, it just seems like you guys keep building on top of places that are used to drain the water out, and you guys don't think there's any correlation or what can we do about it when, we had 2004, there was 4 hurricanes in a row, and it never freaking flooded like it did now. And so it's basically the same thing, just like everybody's saying, like, are you guys going to slow down? What are you guys going to do? Like, it just seems simple that you know, they've been building more in the past 3 years than the past 20 years, and you guys don't find that there's a correlation with it, with the flooding. So that's about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there anybody else?
Excuse me, Chairman. I just want to note, we did have somebody signed up virtually for public comment, but they are not on. So I just wanted to note that.
Thank you. Okay, well, if that's everybody, now we will move on to the public hearing portion of the agenda. For those of you not familiar with our meeting agenda, so the agenda is broken down into 3 parts. The first part is items for continuance. Those are items that are going to be pulled by either the applicant or by staff and will be heard at a later date. We also have consent items, and then we have regular item portion of the agenda. Just a reminder, in-person participants and participants attending through WebEx, including the applicant who have pre-registered for the Planning Commission meeting, will be notified by county staff when they will be permitted to speak. Applicants will be limited to 5 minutes, and other participants will be limited to 3 minutes unless additional time is approved at least 24 hours in advance of the meeting. I don't think we have anybody. Just a reminder, in-person participants and WebEx participants must announce their name, address, and acknowledge if they've been sworn before speaking. And then the 3 or 5 minute timer will start. Today, I think we have one one continuance item, and the meeting was advertised as 2 consent items, but I think one of those is going to be pulled, so. Liam, you want to go through the agenda?
Yes, Liam Devine, Planning Development and Economic Growth Department. Before we actually begin, I do have some housekeeping. The cover sheet for your agenda packet today did need to have a correction under staff, removing Denise Hernandez, the zoning administrator, and replacing it with Patty Chris Yingling, Planning Commission Agenda Coordinator. To begin with the first item, if you're ready.
Yes, go ahead.
PC1, PDE 25-7738. It is a zoning amendment in the name of Evans County Line 80 MPUD, Master Plan Unit Development, Evans Property, Inc. This is a request to continue to the item to January 9th, 2025 at 1:30 in Dade City.
Okay, is the applicant present? Is there anybody else here to speak on this item?
Move to continue item PC1 to the January 9th meeting and here in Dade City.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
PC2, PDE 25-7651 in the name of Tall Timbers MPUD will be pulled. And then PC3, PDE, oh, sorry, let me correct myself. PC3, you'll be sitting as the local planning agency. PDE 25-0440, it's a development agreement in the name of Wiregrass MPUD, Master Plan Unit Development. CKB Development LLC, its proposed is to modify the existing development agreement for the Wiregrass MPUD, and that's coming with a recommendation for approval.
Okay, is the applicant present? Anybody here to speak on this item? Okay.
I move approval of the consent agenda,
Second.
PC3.
All right, motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. so-
Clarify that's a consent agenda made up of only PC3 since we pulled PC2.
Okay, so back to PC2.
Good afternoon, Gavin Covey, Planning, Development, and Economic Growth. This is PDE 25-7615, the Tall Timbers MPUD. And so this is a zoning amendment rezoning from an AC agricultural district to a CC MPUD, Connected City Master Plan Unit Development, to allow for 380 multifamily dwelling units and 180,000 square feet of non-residential uses and associated infrastructure on approximately 38 acres. And this is located at the northwest corner of the intersection of Kenton Road and Tyndall Road. So here's a general location map within the county. And then here's a location map within Connected City. You can see that it's in the orange area, which is in the community hub, but directly adjacent to the urban core, which is intended to be a downtown area in the future.
Looks like north is to the left.
Yeah, the way that the exhibit is made is a horizontal, so that's correct. Here's a location map for you. Here's the current zoning, which is AC. Here's a context map. To the north is a portion of the Murata MPUD. To the west is a Pasco County facility. And to the south is the Kenton MPUD, which was referenced earlier during discussion. And then here is the MPUD master plan. And just to note a couple of design features that have been included with the MPUD. 41 of the townhomes are intended to be rear loaded. There is a maximum 10-foot setback in the mixed use area to make sure that the building orientation is along the future Kenton and Timber Run with parking in the back. And then in the mixed use area as well, 12,000 square feet of non-residential uses are intended to be vertically integrated in mixed use with the apartments. And then lastly, this is the binding concept plan. And PDD is asking for a recommendation of approval with conditions to the Board of County Commissioners.
Gavin, can you go back to the binding concept?
Absolutely.
So, we haven't seen this before, in an MPUD wherein they provide a binding concept plan with this level of detail, and I'm not saying I'm opposed to that, but what does that mean? What are the obligations of the developer in this binding concept plan?
Yeah, so I think the intent is to show some of the negotiated building conditions that I described earlier and to have a general idea of what the development will look like in the future. PDE understands that not everything is going to look exactly the same as in this concept plan, but we do want to have a general idea of what the development is going to be looking like in the future.
So let me ask this question. So this part of Connected City has requirements for mixed use?
So part of Connected City is requiring a distance requirement between a certain amount of uses within a certain area. So that it's correct in terms of a distance requirement, but not necessarily specifically said that this area must have vertically integrated mixed-use apartments.
Is the amount of traffic in this MPUD, in other words, I think the question is, the traffic study requires certain improvements, and that's predicated on having a certain amount of office and a certain amount of mixed use.
Correct. So in the transportation study, they didn't use a mixed use analysis, they just did apartments. The mixed use is actually a lower trip generation than if it were just standard suburban retail or commercial, or office even.
And is there any requirement on the developer to build the mixed use or the office before the townhomes or vice versa?
Nope, there's no requirement like that.
And what if they can't build the mixed use or the office?
Then they would come in for a substantial modification. We could talk about, modifying the binding concept plan and the conditions of approval at that time.
Okay.
If I could just answer, I think Gavin's mostly answered the question, but
yeah,
on a binding concept plan, I think the thought process is that if what they end up building or coming in for site plan approval, if it's materially different from what you see here, it would have to go through the substantial modification process, basically the new rezoning process, come back to the planning commission, come back to the board of county commissioners.
I think that's what I was trying to get at, and then I'll explain later as we get.
Now, there is a condition, I think it's the last,
Correct, this is the last condition.
That says that staff has a certain amount of delegated authority to approve minor modifications to the plan, but it has to substantially comply with what you see.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's basically coming back through the zoning process.
Got it.
Which is a departure from some historical practice where we tended to get more bubble plans.
Right. That's
And there would be no need to go back through the zoning process because it's just a bubble plan. This isn't quite preliminary site plan level, but it's getting close to preliminary site plan level of detail.
okay. That's all. A great explanation of it. Thank you.
Gavin, real quick. Sorry, look down and you walked away. When stuff like this comes on these bigger plans that are part of like some of the bigger community, Village of Pasadena Hills, Connected City, et cetera, is it possible to get some of this detail that's in your presentation included in the agenda packet? And the reason I'm asking that is I mean, we're kind of looking at, well, I saw the agenda and I saw this, I kind of see the snapshot of here's this project, but not anything really in relation to overall Connected City. So, I mean, I know it would help me personally if we could include some information on, you know, the surrounding, I mean, some of these maps and stuff you had in your presentation are good.
Yeah.
We can just include that information in the agenda, that would really help.
Of course, yeah, I can absolutely do that and provide a general Connected City kind of
Perfect.
description,
Detail,
at least
yeah.
a little bit, yeah.
That's right, a little background. Thank
Yeah,
you.
of course.
So one other question too. The wetlands on the property, how is the classification determined?
I believe in their natural resource study, they are all found to be category 3. Is that what you're asking?
Well, I understand that,
Yeah.
but how was that determination made?
I believe through the use of Pasco Mapper in our natural resources department.
So, I'm not trying to. Do we have here what the definitions of the different categories of wetlands are in our comp plan?
I believe they're in the LDC.
Well, they're in the comp plan. But do we have those available? Is there someone that can pull those up? There's some on here that I believe are class 3 wetlands or category 3 wetlands. There's others that I think might meet the other definitions in the
Okay.
code. I see that there's connectivity of wetlands here, that they're not just isolated. And that gives me some concern.
Yeah, of course.
The other thing that I have some concern about, and we'll ask the developer, is in the MPUD master plan that's in our packet, it lists the acreage of wetlands. It lists them all as category 3. I'm not sure I agree that they're all category 3. But there's no wetlands in the post-development condition. This developer is proposing to blitz all of these wetlands. And I understand that under our code, you might be able to nuke a Cat 3 wetland. I'm not sure you can nuke a Cat 1 or 2 wetland. And so how do we get verification that all of these wetlands are actually category 3 wetlands? And the other thing I'll say is this: although our comprehensive plan may allow it, I'm not sure you're going to get a permit from the water management district to do that. Okay, because there's some tests that you have to meet when you have a wetland impact. Right, and the water management district rules recognize that sometimes I may need to affect a little corner of a wetland, or that a wetland may be so small that it has no substantive environmental or biological or hydrologic value. But somehow I'm looking at this aerial photograph and I'm not thinking that these wetlands have 0 hydrologic value, or that someone's actually going to get a permit to be able to just blitz these wetlands. And that's why I asked about the binding concept plan. So the binding concept plan shows that I'm going to attempt to turn these wetlands into giant stormwater ponds. I'm not 100% sure that someone's actually going to get a permit. So what happens if they don't get a permit to do that as far as this entitlement goes, because that binding concept plan shows those are going to be stormwater plans, or ponds, I'm sorry.
Excuse me? We do have Jackie Jordan from Natural Resources online. I don't know if she can answer some of those questions about whether category 1, category 2, category 3, and we did pull up the comp plan section for you.
Okay. So the categories talk about isolated wetlands. I mean, I can see in the aerial photograph the hydrologic connections. I'm not sure these wetlands are isolated. Are they less than 5 acres?
Let's see.
Because I think about 20 or 30% of this site was wetland when I looked at that table.
According to Pasco mapper, they're all category 3.
Yeah, but that's, somebody entered something in a GIS, and
Right.
that doesn't mean they were a wetland expert.
I think we should let Jackie Jordan speak from
Yeah.
Natural Resources.
Jackie, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, Jackie Jordan with Parks, Rec, and Natural Resources Department. So when we get MPUD rezoning, we typically don't have the approved wetland line. It's not a requirement in the code. It's required at site plan submittal. So we did do some historic aerial reviews, and it looks like some of those systems were ditched together. So that's kind of how we make our determination. It's a man-made connection versus a natural historic connection. So we did make an initial determination that they were all category 3 wetlands, which would be anything under 5 acres or less.
But Jackie, just to clarify, further analysis and consideration will be given to those during the site plan review, correct?
Correct. We required the actual approved swift mud delineation at time of site plan submittal. And per the LDC, category 3 and 2 wetlands are able to be impacted as long as they receive their appropriate state approval.
Yes. Yeah, I understand that. I'm just not sure they're actually going to get a state approval to, like I said, I don't think anybody has a problem with a third of an acre wetland that's been highly impacted over the years versus something that's a 2 or 3 acre wetland that actually does have some substantive hydrologic function. And I'm not seeing that the concept plan submitted by the developer recognizes that hydrologic function. I recognize it's going to get reviewed later, but I'm hesitant to grant an entitlement for something that actually cannot be achieved.
Understood.
Okay.
But if it can't be achieved, don't they just adjust their plan? They can only do what they want, I mean, do what they can
Well, so that goes
physically
back
do.
to my question about the binding concept plan.
Okay.
So, okay, now they go to Swift Mud and Swift Mud says, no, you're not gonna blitz
Right.
that wetland and turn it into a stormwater pond. Then is this entitlement that we're evaluating here still valid?
So, to a certain extent, staff has discretion, as I mentioned earlier, to determine what is a substantial modification from the binding concept plan. I suspect, and Patrick can address this, but if what was located in that area was if it just remained a wetland and not a stormwater pond, and it wasn't affecting the development layout of the rest of their site, staff may determine that's not a substantial
Sure.
change to, because it's a wetland now instead of a stormwater pond. Now, if that caused them to completely redo the layout of all their residential units, now
Therein lies my
potentially,
concern.
then it is potentially a substantial modification, but that's something staff has a certain amount of discretion to determine.
Right. And so this is all asked in the context of that there's now something we haven't seen before, and that's the binding concept plan.
Yeah.
Can we make a condition that it has to come back here?
Well, if they change the binding concept plan, it's gonna have to come back here. That was kind of the point, is that,
Okay.
is now that's a substantial amendment to their MPUD, and they're gonna have to bring that revised plan back here and to the Board of County Commissioners. Or Patrick has something else he wants to add.
Are we required to make the plan binding at this point?
Well, there's nothing, okay, this is a little bit of a touchy subject. The board has expressed an interest, and particularly with MPUDs, that the plans that are shown to them, pretty pictures, so to speak, end up being what actually gets built. And so there's been some concerns in the past that the developer shows pretty pictures and saying, this is my wonderful
Understood, yeah.
layout that I'm gonna do here, and then what gets on the ground is completely different. So, that's what I think the board is trying to achieve by requiring these concept plans to be binding, subject to minor modifications that may be made at site. So, yes, there is more of a risk when you have a binding concept plan that if somebody got the wetlands wrong or the stormwater wrong, or, I mean, they're gonna have to do a little more engineering on a, but, make sure they got it right on a binding concept plan, or they risk having to come back to.
So,
Why,
can I
you make it
give an
binding?
example, if I might? And Gavin, could you put oh, you've got the plan back up here. Or can we go back to there's in our packet, there's a wetland and floodplain exhibit. There's one in the developer's MPUD master plan. So, in the northwest corner of the property, well, are we able to bring that up?
Patty's.
There's a wetland and floodplain exhibit in the MPUD master plan.
Yeah, I think it showed the acreages, right?
Yeah, but and I'll show you where I'm going with this. If we can just.
Just while there's some dead time, Patrick Detter, Assistant Director of Planning Services. I got up to say basically what David was going to say, but he did it much more eloquently than I could. So
He usually does.
he usually does. So no additional comment at this time.
Thanks for being here, though, Patrick.
I mean, could you condition it that the concept plan is binding pending state or stormwater approval?
Well,
I mean,
so, and I'm not understanding what the delay is. It's in the agenda packet, but in the developer's MPUD master plan document that's attached to our agenda packet, there is a wetland and floodplain exhibit, and it shows a substantive amount of wetland and floodplain at the northwest corner and the southwest corner of the property. Mm-hmm. Yet their master plan shows those being and if you look at, that's not the exhibit I'm referring to, but this one.
That one.
Yes, okay. So the dark blue line represents floodplain area. The light blue lines represent wetland area. So their master plan shows an intense office development and an intense mixed-use development at the northwest corner and the southwest corner of the property. All right?
Parking lot, a lot of impervious.
Well, in order to accomplish that, that means I need to fill that floodplain and blitz those wetlands. They may or may not, and I doubt, they will actually get permits to do that. When I look at the extent of the floodplain and then I look at the amount of stormwater ponds shown on the master plan, I'm going, well, where are you mitigating all of these floodplain impacts? So that's why I was asking about if there was an obligation to actually do a mixed use and do a mixed office, because I'm not sure you're going to get the approval to do these things.
so,
And does that end up constituting a substantive deviation from that binding concept plan? I'm not sure that they're going to get a permit to turn the wetland. Now, the water management does allow you to use isolated wetlands for water quality treatment. That's something that's legal, but that's different than dredging out the entire wetland and trying to turn it into a stormwater basin.
Well, that was one of my questions.
Right.
Yes.
Can you scroll up to the sheet before that? I think the sheet before that's got delineated wetlands on a survey map that
It
don't
does,
match.
yeah, that's what I was looking at.
so I want to,
But it's not just the amount of wetlands, it's
Right.
the amount of floodplain. our code and the water management district rules also, the section 1104 that the gentleman referenced earlier, require compensation for impacts to floodplains. There's no floodplain compensation areas shown on these master plans. Maybe they intend to do that in the stormwater pond. And I'm not saying that it's a reason to deny a permit if they can't, because you can't get a permit to do this, or it's not a reason to deny the entitlement because you can't get a permit to do this. My question is, this asked in the concept in the context of a binding concept plan. Well, is that a substantive issue that you can't get a permit to actually build that mixed-use building or that office building, or to put townhomes down the middle? If you go back to their concept plan, they had townhomes, a row of townhomes going east and west that are going right through the middle of that floodplain and those wetlands.
So I'll let Patrick elaborate, but I'll try to give you what I think the answer is. I suspect if they were generally in accordance with the binding concept plan, but if there were portions of this project that simply just didn't get developed at all, okay, because they were in the floodplain, in a wetland, but the remainder of the development followed the binding concept plan, staff may well determine that's not a substantial change because in any of the built areas, it followed the binding concept plan. And so I'm not sure that, unless Patrick has a different opinion. Now, the one exception would be if it's an employment site that was promised to get credits in Connected City, because there's a requirement in Connected City that to get credits for the roadway construction, you have to set aside a minimum 4-acre site for employment uses.
Which there's this service-ready site.
Yeah, that's the service-ready site acreage. If that entirety of that area was undevelopable and they never built it, I'm not sure that it would be a basis to say that they departed from the binding concept plan, but it might be a basis to say they wouldn't get any credits for their road construction. Now, in this particular project, I'm not sure they're seeking any credits anyway. I don't remember if this one, that's a Gavin. Okay, so maybe that's not an issue in this project, but that's the only time I could think of that if a site was sort of reserved for employment as a promise to get something, and then that reserved site ended up being entirely undevelopable, it may cause issues. That might be considered a substantial change or a basis to deny them credits, because they didn't give us the employment area that we were promised.
I understand that.
But if it's not, putting aside that issue, I believe that if the rest of the project that was developable followed the binding concept plan and they left the floodplain areas and wetland areas as just blank or undeveloped, my guess is that staff would still say that's consistent with the binding concept plan. In other words, the areas they developed, as long as that was consistent with the binding concept plan, they'd probably say that's not a substantial amendment.
Okay.
Is
That's
that
what I was
accurate,
trying to
Patrick, or tell me if I'm wrong?
No, I'd agree with you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, is the applicant present? You gonna speak at this time, or?
Good afternoon. Thank you. Shelley Johnson, 6400 Madison Street, and I have been sworn. I'm just here to answer any questions, so if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. But we did hear you loud and clear and understand what you're talking about.
It wasn't a statement or a position. I was
I know.
trying to understand the function of the binding concept plan.
Yeah. Yeah, and we understand, the discussion in regards to, if it's a substantial, we're going to do whatever we're required to do, so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now, public comment. Anybody here to give public comment? I think, Liam, do you want to call them in order that they signed up, or do you want to just let them come up? Liam?
The first one sign up is David Torino.
Okay.
So then Michael.
You're back.
Yes, sir. This is the one that counts. And I understand the 3 minutes. There is a couple of points of information because the information on their application does not meet the grading plan for the adjacent property where the roads are going to go, which will have an effect on the stormwater. So all of this is going to be objective. I've got about 20 seconds of subjective, but there's a lot of objective here to share with you. So this is a picture of the site. You can see this is from, all of these aerial photos are from this morning. So they're all current. There's nothing in the past. The aerial they used is actually in the dry season. And just to remind you, on this parcel, 380 multifamily dwelling units and 180,000 square feet plus parking on 38 acres. This is the site plan they showed you. It's pretty. It's got colors. None of the wetlands. Here's your topo map. Now, if you type into Google the address to get there, directions, you can see on the left, that's a lake. You guys are way smarter than me. On the right is the topo map with your wetlands. That's the aerial that they showed us. The aerial they showed us. Here's your floodplain. 380 multifamily dwelling units and 180,000 square feet plus parking on that floodplain. If we back out a little bit, you can see the topo from the west, the northwest, the north, the northeast, and the east all falls into this bottom. That should be very important because this bottom receives all of the water from Florida, from the county site. Your next development to the northwest, which is 17, 18 feet higher than this piece of property, and then everything on the east side. These pictures are from this morning. Every one of those wetlands currently holds water. Every one of them. We haven't seen rain since the hurricane. They are all holding water. Again, the topo map with the level 3 and the level 1 and AE on it, this water collects here and then it moves on to the neighboring properties, the adjacent properties. So if you look at the site plan, that office building with all of its parking is right on that lake. It holds water most of the year. The mixed use is on the southwestern corner. This is the adjacent property and the point of information. The grading plan from this project right here, which was submitted in July of 24, here's a copy of it, does not show their road going at a southeastern diagonal across this property. That road's going to go straight to the east on the top or north side of that thick red line. If we back out, what you see is this basin drains to the south on the left side of the existing Tyndall Road. It then goes back into and pillows in the Kenton MPUD, which is the rectangle there. And if we back out again, you'll see that in the left picture, that basin where the red wetlands are flows into the first level, and that encapsulates the Lakeview Estates. If we zoom in on the right, this is your current flood zones, and you can see how close it gets to all of the residential. Some of these homes flooded out in the last hurricane, but this is existing without pushing that water, without shedding it somewhere else. The level of risk for the entire development there for Lakewood Estates. That's the topo map for it. So the property we're talking about is 104 feet. These homes are at 104 feet, 103 feet. This is where the water's going to go.
Michael, I need you to try to wrap it up.
Yes, sir. So let me give you just a little bit of the subjective here. This is the bottom for the whole connected city. This is the second most important piece of property for the whole development. This is where the water pools and starts at for the whole drainage basin west of Kenton. The whole connected city, what we've been given, and that's looking to the north at this property, it would be irresponsible to move this project anywhere close to what it is right now on for the BOCC to see. This entire piece of property floods continuously. There's nowhere for the water to go, and the wetlands have got to be protected. The whole connected city here, we're still not seeing where the parks are gonna go. We're still not seeing where any green space is gonna go outside of private parks for the individual developments. This would be a prime piece of property to put an actual connected city green space so that everybody can enjoy it. As a county, let's buy it from the owner. But to put an MPUD here, where all it's gonna do is blitz or nuke the wetlands and move the water on to flood the neighbors downstream is irresponsible.
Okay. Thank you. Next.
Jennifer McCarthy?
Hello.
Hello.
Jennifer McCarthy, 8819 Kenton Road. So this has been a long decade because I've been talking about the connected city since 2013. I've gone through Matt Armstrong, Ernie Monaco, and Gavin, really nice guy, doesn't have a whole lot of experience. We need to get way more experienced personnel on this project. It's a gimmick. And it's been piecemealed. It's not a cohesive image. This should be a cohesive image. It should be something for the county, and it's not. It's not driving anything. You got Epperson with the $60 a day to go into a lagoon. Okay, that's great. But there's nothing like Bonnet Springs Park. There's nothing that's exciting about it. And there's never gonna be anything exciting about it. If all you guys do is have houses and warehouses here. So, I mean, I live on Kenton Road, so obviously I wanted to see an area that we were able to live where with everything coming through, and now I think on this parcel it said that there would be, up to 60-foot apartments on that. I mean, I live on a 10-acre parcel, so you talk about, okay, we have stormwater and we have this. I do way less impact on the environment than any of this, and I pay for it. I pay a lot of money, taxes on that land, to not have the kind of effect that these areas are having. But I did want to talk about the flooding in the specific area that you now have the ability to control. We have evidence, not just from the recent hurricanes, but from the afternoon storms from the past couple years, not just this year after year, because I run up and down Kenton Road during my lunch break, and I am running through water. So I am gross water. I've tried speaking with Swift Mud, and they say, hey, we're following the state laws. So, and earlier you said that, hey, you're following the state guidelines. But here's my issue. We know that the Kenton parcel, FASA, that's already been approved, and that Timber Pines flood. So you have the ability now to resolve this specific area of known concern before you approve the development and truly have an everlasting negative effect on this area. When you're looking on Curly Road, on the east side of Curly Road, all the cow pastures, they look like cow pastures. When you look at Timber Lakes, when you're walking on that road, it looks like wetlands. So whether or not it says 3, it does not look like a cow pasture. It looks like wetlands. 10 years ago, when I used to horseback ride through there, there's gators. So they're coming, I mean, this area, it's been like this for decades. It's had water for decades. I mean, the other thing is just the connected city. There's no community, there's no innovation. I mean, there was supposed to be a innovation area, community hub, there's not. Traffic is beyond ridiculous now. So, I mean, for years, everybody said Wesley Chapel is gonna be the new Brandon when it comes to traffic, and it is. We are sitting in lights for 2 to 3 times. My kid, because now there's no transportation to and from a lot of these schools, she is in the vehicle almost 2 hours a day, going back and forth to school in one activity that's all located in the Wesley Chapel area. My 6-year-old, 2 hours a day in a car. I mean, it's just not the life that I thought was gonna be here. Things that used to take 5 minutes take 20 minutes now. I mean, it's really disheartening because I've lived in Pasco County for decades. And I'm not old, right? I've lived in Pasco County for decades. And I remember with the JCPenney sitting there, Road to Nowhere. I mean, I've seen all of this, and in the last 5 years, it is so sad what I've seen. It's just nobody wants it that is living here to the extent that is happening. So you know, like everybody else, I think we need to stop approving the new development until we already know that there's tens of thousands of approved developments and housing that are already approved. Why don't we let some of this happen and see what do we actually need here? I mean, we're approving something where Kenton Road hasn't been approved. You have Kenton Road, you have the property right here, you have the FAZA, you have 5 areas that are already approved that haven't been built. You have no idea the impact on it. And I don't know. So I don't believe that this should be approved. I think this is gonna have a negative impact on water, on flooding, on traffic. I don't see how that amount of homes is gonna only generate 70 students towards our school, because that's what it says in the agenda. I mean, it just doesn't, nothing seems,
Okay.
nothing seems right, so.
We got it.
I
We
appreciate it.
you coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was our last member of the public who has signed up.
Okay. So no other public comment? The applicant like to come back up?
I can answer a couple of the questions. As far as stormwater, obviously whatever regulations are in place at the time when this comes in for construction plan and permits and that, it'll have to comply with whatever those regulations are. If they're more stringent at the time, then so be it. I'm sensitive to, I live in Pasco County, I have for many years, so I'm sensitive to what I'm hearing. I've had people that have been impacted by flooding, so, I can appreciate where everybody's coming from. So I do know that that would be something they would have to do. As far as the actual plan itself, it is consistent with what this particular area, this community hub, calls for in regards to where this property's at. I think that's why planning staff has supported it, because, it does have that mix of non-residential uses, the vertical integrated uses. They want that. There is non-residential on the property, but it's part of a larger whole in terms of that planning area and connected cities. And I do know the plan complies with the goals and objectives for that particular community hub where it's located. So, but I would be more than happy to answer questions. So,
can I ask you a question, Charlotte?
Sure.
So, I get your point. I might, and I realize you're not seeking credits, but to a certain extent, when the board approves a mixed-use project, the carrot for the board is the non-residential portion of the MPUD. Sometimes they only allow the residential because they're getting the non-residential and mixed-use portion of the MPUD. To Mr. Moody's point, do you all really feel that that portion of the MPUD is developable given the floodplain and wetland locations on this site?
and I can't answer that question. There was a wetland delineation done on this site. SwiftMud it was approved, inspected, it was flagged in the field. Unfortunately, my understanding is these wetlands, and I think that's maybe what the county expert is also kind of coming to the conclusion on, is they're unfortunately already contaminated. And so that's why they're all getting flagged as class 3s by by SwiftMud, by the wetland delineation that was done, I think by what the county is seeing. So I do think the property can be developed, but again, if it can't, then yeah, I mean, if we have a substantial modification and there's something that they're proposing where it's going to throw it out of consistency with the goals and objectives of the comp plan, I think that they're going to have to come back and revisit it.
I guess what I'm.
For sure.
Let me ask the question a different way. Because in theory, you could input the employment uses in the upland portion of the site, or the part that's clearly uplands.
Mm-hmm.
But you put the residential there, so I guess, did staff tell you to kind of orient the uses the way that it's oriented, where the non-residential is all on the west side where the wetlands and floodplain is, or is that something you all chose to do?
I mean, I don't know the answer to that, because I'm not the engineer, so I didn't lay it out. My understanding is it's been reviewed by staff. This is, what they're comfortable with. Again, they're class 3 wetlands, so my understanding is, they're going to be impacted and mitigated for. Now, I'm not an engineer. Whether that can be accomplished, I don't know. But
well, I don't think it's just the wetlands; it's also the floodplain you'd have to mitigate.
Yeah.
Too. So, let me just ask staff the question. Would staff have supported this MPUD if the non-residential portion ends up being not developable because it's in wetlands and floodplain?
So the SRSA site and the office site is actually not a requirement for this project. That was something that was negotiated for specifically. is just underneath the threshold for that office SRSA site. So I could see either way. Staff is always just looking for employment generating uses whenever possible.
So are you saying that even if only the residential portion of this MPUD were built, you would still support it?
I personally would support it. Correct, yes.
Yeah, but not you personally, does
I'm asking, does the planning department support the, I mean, I understand that you always want mixed use and you always want to, I'm not, my question is on this particular project, was that important to your recommendation of approval that they have this employment and mixed use portion of the MPUD?
Patrick Detter, Planning Services. I don't think it was necessarily vital. Of course, it's great when we get mixed-use development. We always look for that, but I don't think it was necessarily vital for this area. This is in the community. It's still in the community hub area of right.
So what does that mean? What's the function of the community hub?
Community hub was envisioned higher density. So the core of connected city. What's that? Oh, I can read the actual definition if you'd like. The project is located within the community hub. The community hub is characterized by a potential mix of residential, educational, recreational, civic, cultural, and resort-type uses centered on a central amenity, the King Lake. So I think the idea was we have the Northern Innovation Zone, the Southern Innovation Zone, where it's...
Can you go back and read that one more time? I'm
sure.
Sorry.
Community hub is characterized by a potential mix of residential, educational, recreational, civic, cultural, and resort-type uses centered on a central amenity, the King Lake. So, Northern Innovation Zone at the top, Southern Innovation Zone, generally lighter densities, going towards the middle where there's a little bit higher density, multifamily type projects, moving towards the west to the downtown area, which was going to be a little bit more.
The question I'd have for you.
What's the central amenity?
Well, no, he's saying King Lake is the central amenity.
Okay.
Sure. Not necessarily with commercial around the lake itself, but...
I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
So...
Yeah,
hold on. The question I have is, where's the cultural? Where's the resort? I'm not seeing how this fits with what you just described.
Sure. So it's not each project is going to include all of these things. It's the community hub area is a large geographical area.
Have we approved any that have those things?
What specifically? Resort?
Well, read the definition again.
Sure.
Can we put it up there?
Yeah.
It's
Patrick,
part of...
I think this kind of goes back to my statement earlier of kind of getting an understanding of what all is included here in this community hub portion and connected city and all that kind of stuff, and seeing the surrounding. I mean, it's really hard for us when we see these one at a time and these one-offs like this.
Sure.
Not know, I mean, for that matter, everybody that comes in the community hub on their individual projects should come in with nothing but multifamily.
Right.
And how do we know without having a bigger
Right,
picture
we're not
of what's
seeing the big picture, right?
involved
So we've got this
in the
giant
project?
planning area, and you've just described this function of this sub-area of this planning area.
Sure.
And we've got around a central amenity, King Lake, where, and I can tell you multiple times, we've restricted access to the lake, so I'm not sure how that's an amenity to anybody. And I'm not sure we've approved any resorts around there. And that's why I'm curious to actually see the language up here of this definition.
So I can tell you, as somebody who reviews almost every MPD in Connected City, I do not recall any, well, one might argue that the Crystal Lagoon is a, quote, resort, okay, but if you put that aside and the area where, around the Crystal Lagoon, I'm not aware of any MPD that has come in where we've allowed for resort-type entitlements.
It looks like that's part of the North Innovative Zone where they're looking.
Right, but if you're asking for if you're asking specifically for the community hub area, I believe the only non-residential entitlements we've allowed or required would be probably office or retail type entitlements, not resort. That's from my recollection, I don't.
Right,
believe-
and there's tons of restricted access to the lake itself. I think the original plan had envisioned that King Lake would have a boardwalk going along the length of it. That could be, you know, people could connect through that nature trails, that type of thing. But I believe those types of impacts were not necessarily feasible with any of the actual MPUDs that came in after the
It
fact.
looks like
So
the community hub section of Connected City is around, all the way around that lake.
yeah,
Kinda
it's
centered around that lake.
generally around that lake, right?
And this is in the upper northeast or northwest portion of.
Right, and it's supposed to connect into the downtown business core that is supposed to be established. So this abuts that, and that's why you see some non-residential right on that, that side of this MPUD.
It abuts urban core, it looks like.
That's correct. And Mr. Jardy, to your point, yes.
So how do we assure that there's a mix of residential, educational, recreational, civic, cultural, and resort type uses? So everyone that comes in here wants a multifamily, they all want townhomes, 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 townhomes. Where's the requirement for the civic and the cultural and resort type uses? And I understand not every project will be a civic cultural, but if we just approve all townhomes, then we never meet the goal or the objective of the community hub zone, because there was nobody comes in to propose, well, I'm gonna do something civic or cultural.
I mean, for what it's worth, this is on the edge of the community hub zone. It's the very corner of the zone.
It's not the project, I'm asking in general, because this goes to Jamie's comment, and I'm frustrated too with every time we get something in Connected City, I'm looking at this thing with blinders on, and I'm not seeing the whole zone and whether we've achieved the vision of the zone. And who's making sure that that gets done?
So, and I don't disagree with either of you. I think you both have very valid points that we could probably do better in our presentations to you to show the context of the entire area.
It's not just the presentation, who's making sure that the goal, the intent, and the character that's laid out is actually achieved?
Sure, I would think that would lean towards the planning department, planning commission to keep an eye on that, the board to ultimately
But how
approve.
can we do that if we don't even?
Yeah, it's hard for us to see the context of all the different projects that are out there, you know, because we're looking at them piecemeal as they come up here to the dais. So,
Sure, I understand.
Well, Patrick, let me just add to that comment. So, I mean, it appears as if somebody in planning was trying to make this sort of the logical extension of the urban core zone, which talks about having a mix of businesses, employment generating uses, higher density, smaller block sizes, which might make some sense.
Sure.
Okay, because it's right next to the urban core.
Sure.
But then I heard staff say they don't care if it has those things, that it's perfectly fine if it's residential. So can you explain that?
Well, go ahead. I'm going to bring up Mr. Vermillion.
Good afternoon, William Vermillion, Planning Development, Economic Growth. Not to contradict any of my colleagues that have spoke today, but most likely what would happen is we would renegotiate based on a minimum square footage of those office uses if it wasn't achievable when they came in for site plans compared to the binding concept because of the proximity to the urban core. And that means that this body would see it again.
Okay, so that is different than what your colleague said. So
Correct. So I came up from the back, and
so,
here I am.
So you're saying that the non-residential part is crucial to staff's recommendation of approval for this MPUD?
Correct, because of the proximity to the urban core. What you were just talking about, the logical
Because it looks like
step.
that non-residential
Correct.
portion is on the west side of the property, which is adjacent
Correct,
to the
which
urban core.
directly abuts.
So then I'll ask you the same question I asked earlier then. Would you still have recommended approval of this project if it did not include those things?
No, we would have negotiated some sort of non-residential mixed-use component along that road.
So what bothers me when I look at this is And I'm sorry, because I'm looking at my own screen, and that's back to that exhibit that I asked that we put up earlier, that is the wetlands and floodplains. And I'm trying to figure out, why doesn't the concept plan, binding concept plan, follow the natural features of the land? And it seems to me that we can still achieve the objectives of the concept plan, but also respect Mother Nature here at the same time. For instance, up in the very north, and I'm sorry because I don't have a pointer, up in the very north, why couldn't the office be up there? I think the townhomes generally do sort of follow the upland. Why can't the mixed use,
The wrong way.
why can't the mixed use be there, the office be there? We're showing an office blitz in a wetland, a mixed use blitz in a wetland. We've got uplands that we can be used. Townhomes can be located in here. Instead, we want to make this lots, blocks, and rows and blitz wetlands all at the same time, while the public is not exactly thrilled about stormwater drainage over the last couple of months here. And I understand this is going on a long time, but
Certainly.
at some point, we have the responsibility to recognize, to develop in accordance with the lay of the land. And that drives me nuts. I get clients that come to my office too that don't seem to understand water flows downhill. Here, they come in here with a layout, and I want to put a building down here on the low side of the site because it's convenient, and I want to put my stormwater pond at the top of the hill. I get that all the time. And I understand, but engineers, where that's what we're supposed to make happen, but why are we fighting gravity here? We're gonna go.
So, I think part of the root of Mr. Moody's concern, and I'll ask staff this question, is to me, the root cause of the problem is you're basically saying this concept plan is binding. Because if it wasn't binding, in theory, it would just be a group of entitlements in a bucket, and they could put those entitlements, they could lay them out just as Mr. Moody suggested. They could put them, but to me, the conflict is that we're saying the concept plan is binding, but it may not be able to achieve some of what the county is looking for.
Sure. So to both points, staff has no issue with following the natural layout of the wetland nor the floodplain. If the applicant were to meet the conditions of approval for the building orientation that were laid out, it would still be substantially compliant with that binding concept plan, even though it didn't match exactly. If the building orientations still remained the same as in the conditions of approval today, then PDE would deem that that would be substantially compliant because it would be accomplishing the intent and purpose that was laid out that you guys were recommending.
So that's why I was
today.
asking all the questions about what does a binding concept plan mean? And then how much latitude does your department feel like it has in determining whether something is in accord with the binding concept plan?
Yeah, you said if the building orientation is substantially similar, but it looks like.
No, if the building orientation is the same, not substantially similar. If the building orientation matches the conditions of approval as in the agenda packet, but the buildings were in different spots.
So, William, but I think part of the concern is they're showing a building, say, in the southwest corner, where there may not be a building at all.
Right,
So how could the building orientation be substantially similar if it just doesn't exist?
I thought we had already covered that. If it didn't exist, we weren't going to hold them hostage, as it were, for it not getting built if it was still.
That was the reason for my follow-up question.
If we don't, then all I'm getting is a townhouse development.
But
I'm getting sold a concept plan that says I'm going to get a vertically integrated mixed use, and I'm going to get an office, and I'm going to get some townhomes,
So circling back, I said,
Because really what should happen is if more of it's consumed, then there ought to be fewer multifamily and then some of the offices in there, right?
Yeah, and
You
I
would
think
have
part
some
of
ratio.
the, William, I think.
I said that previously. It would be renegotiated if there was no non-residential, in which case it would come back to you guys.
All right, but how does that
Because
happen?
it's a
How does that
modification.
happen? If we approve this today, well, actually, we don't get the final approval, but if the board approves this, okay, and they come in here for a site plan, they come into Brad's department and they get a site plan approval for some townhomes, and he says, yep, townhomes are shown on the concept plan, looks like the concept plan. They brought me a Swift Mud permit, go build your townhomes. And then they never ever come back with a mixed-use development or a office building. So then I haven't met and achieved the goals and the intent of the community hub. I'm not even sure this actually meets and achieves those goals, but nonetheless, I've never met and achieved those goals.
But what I'm saying is if they had no non-residential and it was just townhomes, it wouldn't be substantially compliant because we're, like I mentioned.
So
when
are
I-
you saying that they're required to come and get a site plan approval for all of this at one time?
No, I mean, we could craft a condition today about phasing, right? If you guys want to see the
Well,
first phase to be the non-residential
Well, it
component,
sounds
we
like
can
we're
do
trying
that.
to renegotiate it here. That's just not the
Yeah,
right
I
place for the
think, William,
renegotiation.
And there's a lot of kind of moving parts here. One, I think the binding concept plan and first off, I think they've over asked for entitlements, but we don't really know that at this point. It's not that uncommon to ask for more entitlements than you can actually achieve on the property.
Yes.
Okay, that being said, I don't see anywhere outlined where there is a phasing plan, where there is any kind of guarantee, where there are any minimums, if that's important, which I think what I'm hearing up here today and what I've seen in the community hub, that's an important component here. I agree with John's point that, I mean, there's nothing the way this is written today to stop this from a townhome project coming in, building out the townhomes, and then trying to negotiate the build out of the more difficult property. I mean, there's a lot of restrictions in this property that, from an engineering standpoint, have not, in my opinion, been even accounted for.
Sure. And I don't disagree with you. And I think what Will was saying, staff has no issue with any kind of condition that would require the non-residential component to proceed or go along with the residential, but I think the applicant would need to weigh on whether or not they would be okay with the condition as well. And to, I think, some points made about the binding concept plan, you know, if they're not substantially compliant with the binding concept plan, you guys will see it again. So, but still, your point about phasing still applies. Understand that. Mr. Tippett.
It's been a fun discussion, and quite frankly, every single person that has spoken on this is absolutely right. This is the inherent problem with binding concept plans, but there has been a commitment to go that route, so we want to try and do that. And I think that the solution here, just to not create too much of a problem, I think it's a concept of phasing. But as you know, when you phase a plan at my level, you have to, everything has to be there. It can't be dependent on a future phase of development. So there's a level of engineering that has to be done. So whatever we put in as far as this phasing, it should also be kind of a conceptual phasing. A certain amount of non-residential has to be approved prior to going beyond this amount. Some sort of a generic thing like that, rather than drawing a line.
And
the line may not work.
I would tell you, Brad, I 100% agree with you that that's the case. I'm just not sure if this is the time and place. But
Yeah, I mean, it feels like, you know, if this has to come back to us, this kind of, you know, should have been done right in the first place. You know, I feel like some of this engineering should have been done before we get into a binding concept plan.
But I think Mr. Moody's point is that if there's going to be a phasing condition about non-residential versus residential, that's something that staff should negotiate before it ever gets to the planning commission.
I'm not comfortable, I'm personally not comfortable with trying to pull a number out of the air and say, well, you better build X many square feet of this and that before you build this many townhomes or vice versa. And I think that all needs to get looked at.
Well, and the other reason I think staff needs to do it is, no offense to staff, but we've heard somewhat conflicting testimony on the importance of the non-residential. So that which makes it even more difficult for planning commission to come up with a number, because we don't know how important that non-residential component is. So
To move this along, I mean, would a continuance make sense, give some more time to make?
So I would leave that up to the applicant and the staff that are
I
directly
know
involved, but.
I know obviously you don't want to.
Yeah, it is something that there could
but-
possibly be some solution here, because I think the condition that would be added is somewhat generic in nature. You wouldn't necessarily pull a number, completely out of the air. There would be some kind of a
Well,
rational.
I don't know that I agree, Brad. I mean, what you're describing is basically a commitment that a certain amount of the non-residential will get built.
Approved.
So site plan approved, whatever, before they get to a certain amount of residential.
Yes.
How would planning commission come up with those numbers? I mean,
The applicant may be able to provide those numbers today. I don't know
if
they
the
can or
applicant
not,
can
but if
commit
there-
to certain
if there's
percentages,
something
the
that-
staff and the planning commission are in agreement with it, I guess maybe that works, but I guess I'll defer to the staff and the applicant.
I think we just need to kick it to these guys
And then,
and see what their thoughts are.
David, I have a question for you.
We just don't need to be planning from the dais.
Are you, well, yes, I agree with you, Derek. Are there any comprehensive plan policies that you can think of right offhand that would attempt to either encourage or discourage the wholesale destruction of a wetland to accommodate a project? I understand, don't get me wrong, and I'm involved in land development. I'm one of these bad guy engineers that does these plans for these land developers. And there are times where we come across an inconveniently located mud hole. A lot of times they're cattle waddle holes, or they were some cattle watering pond dug 100 years ago for a ranch. And we fill them in, and we mitigate off-site, and we create floodplain compensation areas to make up for that loss of historic basin storage and floodplain storage. But we don't look at properties and go, well, hey, 40% of this property's wetland. We'll just fill the whole thing, dredge it all out, turn it into a stormwater pond. And I will tell you, and I'm not accusing all developers of doing that, the vast majority of them do come in here and protect and build around these wetlands, and we show these wetland buffers. There's no wetland buffers here. We're just gonna dredge the wetland out and turn it into a stormwater pond. I'm just not sure. So my question is do we have any policies that would encourage that, discourage that, require that?
So I'll probably need Jackie to help weigh in on this, but my general understanding is that if it's a category 1 wetland, we absolutely do have comp plan policies that discourage and in fact basically say you can't impact that class 1 wetland unless there's no feasible alternative. I mean, it's a pretty stringent standard.
I'm familiar with that.
On a category 1 wetland. Whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, the standard is certainly not as strict for a category 2 or 3, but I'm gonna let Jackie weigh in on whether we do any kind of avoidance analysis on a category 2 or 3 wetland.
So, and Jackie, before you respond, I'll just say that if you apply to the water management district, one of your burdens that you have to meet if you want to fill a wetland is you have to demonstrate minimization and or avoidance, and then you also have to demonstrate that this is in the public interest.
But I think my general understanding is that standard is more stringent than what is in our comp plan.
Okay. And
So,
that's
but
what what I'm trying to ask.
But I'll let Jackie weigh in if she wants to add to that.
Sure. Yes, so that's what our comp plan and our code requires. Some category 1 wetlands are only allowed to be impacted for, access and linear utilities. But category 2s and 3s can be impacted as long as they get their state approval. So we don't really have a say in if they're minimizing and avoiding at our level, just because the code defers to the state for those.
Okay, understood.
Thank you,
Jackie, can you comment on how our, and the comp plan policy on floodplain protection would apply potentially here?
Our department isn't dedicated to that section. That would fall under the current
What section
planning.
you're looking at, Matt?
I'm looking at, flu 1.2.
Can we put that up?
Excuse me, what was that section again?
1.2.5. And then I don't know that 1.2.6 may apply as well. It's review of rezoning requests within areas of frequent flooding. But it's right there with it, so. So it's the, it's future land use 1.2.
Flu, right.
You're in con.
You have to scroll the other way, I think.
Keep scrolling down. Should be below that.
You said 1.2.5?
Yes. I'm sorry, it should be above that, Wrong way. There you go.
I'll wait for you.
Well, my general understanding, and all that staff, if we have stormwater staff, they can give you a more detailed understanding, is that this comp plan policy is implemented through our land development regulations.
That was gonna be my comment.
And
Yes.
so the details of how we limit development within the 100-year floodplain are contained within our land development regulations. In particular, is it section 1200? Patrick, you would know. Where's our stormwater regulations?
I don't know off the top of my head. It's either 12 or 14. Then
Okay.
we have stormwater quality, which is 9.
In other words, this is setting forth a general policy to protect the floodplains. But the details of how that is regulated are in land development code.
Okay.
So if Shelley gets up and says, we'll comply with the land development code, she's arguably complying with this policy because it's the policy implemented through the land development code.
That makes sense.
Should there be a basic need, if you're gonna come in and you're gonna commit to a binding concept plan, and I understand why the board would want this, and I would tell you that I'm frustrated sometimes. I call it the bait and switch. We get presented a pretty picture, and then that's not what we actually get in the field. But shouldn't there be some preliminary or basic cursory evaluation of a project to see, what if I would have just come in here and said, I want to pave this whole thing? Well, I know you're not going to get a permit for that. So then what's the point of a binding concept plan if I know that I can't ever get that permitted?
Yeah, I don't see how you can have a binding concept plan without having the SWIFT mode approvals ahead of time. That was.
Well, I'm not sure they need to, but I think what I'm asking is, shouldn't there be some kind of cursory review? I mean, I realize we don't want to put them through the site plan review when they're trying to go through the entitlement phase, but somebody to put some common sense on a plan and say, yeah, that looks doable, you know, within some reasonable deviation, which is the intent of this concept plan, right? The staff can approve some deviations. But if a developer came in here and said, well, I just want to pave this wall to wall, we know that's not doable. I'm not going to approve an entitlement to do that.
So,
My personal belief is that, I like the idea of the binding concept plan. I think the idea as a regulatory tool or an entitlement tool, that this needs to be thought through a little bit more.
So, Mr. Moody, I think it's not a black and white answer to your question, because I think it ultimately depends on what part of the binding concept plan is subject to not being built if they can't get these permits. Yeah. So, for example, if the area where they were showing, if the areas with the wetlands and floodplains was all townhomes, and maybe they can build less townhomes, I don't know that staff or the board really cares, okay, because they're just townhomes. Arguably, we have a lot of those, okay? So, but if the area they're showing where the wetlands, this is why I asked the question, how important are these non-residential entitlements to this approval? Because if that's where the wetlands and floodplain is, where they're showing the carrot to the county, which is the non-residential mixed-use stuff, that's a little more problematic, because to your point earlier, what happens at the first site plan in is just townhomes. They all get built. They show some conceptual phase 2 with the non-residential mixed-use stuff, and then phase 2 never comes in because it's got wetland impacts, floodplain impacts, and that goes to, William's point. Well, staff wanted that to be non-residential because it's right next to the urban core. So I think,
which may not be possible because of
what I'm saying is it depends on what they're showing in that area. I mean, if it's just more housing, maybe not the end of the world if it doesn't get built. To your point, a lot of stuff gets over entitled, and so if you're asking what does the county care about, I'll just go by William's answer. The county cares about the employment generating portion of the project. That's what helps our tax base. If we're going to impact wetlands, arguably it should be for things like that improve the tax base of the county, not for more townhomes.
And create jobs.
Because at least we're getting, yes, we're sacrificing wetlands and floodplain, but at least we're getting jobs. And there's a need for economic development in the county too. So you don't want to stymie the economic development of the county because it might have some wetland and floodplain impacts.
Right, and I recognize that there are impacts, except it's not uncommon. I'm laying out a subdivision street and I turn a corner and I clip off a little piece of a wetland. That's not an uncommon thing in this business. That's done every day. We don't come in and generally just wholesale wipe out all the wetlands, whether they be Category 3 wetlands or Category 1 wetlands in the Pasco County Comprehensive Plan. And I can tell you, when you go to get your state and federal permits for wetlands, there's no such thing as a Category 1, 2, or 3. In fact, we need, actually, whoever's working on the comp plan, we need to get rid of that, because that doesn't even comport to state and federal law. In state and federal law, a wetland's a wetland's a wetland's a wetland. But sure, I'd be more in favor of a continuance for them to come back with a plan that, one, provides some level of assurance that we're going to get what we see, and then two, I'll ask them, I guess maybe our comprehensive plan and our land development code don't obligate them, but I'll ask them to consider please being good stewards to the land, listen to the people who got up and spoke prior to this hearing about their concerns, and I'm not telling you that I agree with everything that was said. I'm an engineer and I've got my own views on some of the flooding and some of the causes and not causes, but I do hear them.
Sure.
And I would hope that these people would hear them and understand that you're coming to this board and the county commission, you're asking for something. Well, this is a negotiation. You don't get everything you want. You got to give some stuff. So you give, you get.
Well, from what I've heard, there's two different solutions possible. It's either continuation or some sort of a condition that delineates a phasing thing. And we were going to ask the applicant if perhaps they had an idea on what phasing might work.
Okay, I'm sure they might be able to answer. They're fine with continuance, by the way,
Okay.
if
Okay.
you want to know that. If you want to answer that one, you could.
Is
potentially answer.
there, well then, if that is the case, if they're fine with the
That would be
continuance,
cleaner.
Shelley,
Mhm.
is there a suggested amount of time you think you'd accomplish this? 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months?
And I think an overall update on the connected city plan would be nice to accompany that if we're gonna look at this again.
Sure would.
Agreed.
Keep that in mind as far as time needed.
So if I can jump in here, just, I don't know what the timeline suggestion, but our next two Dade City hearings for Planning Commission. The next Dade City hearing is 12/12/2024, 1:30 in Dade City, and then the one after that is 1/9/2025, Dade City at 1:30.
And they say they would like to shoot for 12/12.
Does staff believe it can get that done in that time?
Staff does believe that.
Okay, because I think we're going to be here a long time on January 9th.
So, can I ask, Patrick, is your intent for the continuance to create a new binding concept plan, or is your intent to just come up with a phasing condition? Because the reason I ask that question is because I think it's going to take longer to redo the binding concept plan than just write up a phasing condition. So where is staff going with this?
So I think we're interested in doing the condition, right? So if they have a binding concept plan and they say they can make this work engineering-wise in terms of floodplain and that type of thing, so be it. If they can't do that, they'll have to come back in again if we have that condition in there that says that they need a certain portion of non-residential first. So I think we're more interested in getting that condition that guarantees us that non-residential.
All right, and then I would just say, I think internally, you guys need to be thinking about how you'll actually administer and enforce binding concept plans. I'm not going to tell you how to run your department. I
Sure.
don't know whether that's a policy memo or a staff meeting or however you. But I think there's going to be questions about that at the board too, especially the first time somebody doesn't deliver on something that one commissioner's going to say, well, that doesn't look like that binding concept plan to me. Then you have to answer to them.
Yeah, we actually started writing up what that might be. So we are in the preliminary talks of defining what a binding concept plan is, because that can vary depending on project to project. So yeah, we're in the process of doing that.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, especially like the minimum requirements. I mean, because, when I think binding concept plan, in my mind, it automatically goes to, this is the general layout, okay?
Sure.
Well, general layout kind of goes to where your access points are and what does the connectivity look like through the project? Well, then I think there's a condition in here that the accesses are conditional or not stuck at this spot. Well, that contradicts what my mind goes to for a binding concept plan, so.
Understood.
think that's
Yeah, we're
important.
going to better define that.
And as Commissioner Munn said too, it would be great to see what the overarching plan is and where this fits into the plan for connected cities for these future projects. And
Okay.
I don't know if there's already a procedure in place internally within your department to kind of keep track of these projects as they get approved and how they fit into the overall.
So I heard one of the
development plan.
commissioners asked for a comprehensive update or review of the progress of Connected City. Is there an effort going on to do that, to make a presentation to the board to show them, here's what the vision was, here's what we've actually achieved? I've heard them ask this a couple of times.
Because in my mind, this is what, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, right?
Right.
And you have little pieces that are dropping into place, but, we want to be able to see what that picture looks like outside of that jigsaw puzzle. And, I think the commissioners, you have some public ones too.
I think I was at that meeting, and there definitely was clear direction from the board to have a workshop on VOPH.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're correct, Dave.
But there may have been some mention at the same board meeting about wanting something similar for Connected City, but I don't know that was a clear direction.
That's my bad. I think it was VOPH that I'm
But
thinking of.
staff can tell me if I'm wrong.
But I'll ask the commissioners, please ask for the same for Connected City.
Sure, yeah. I think there's supposed to be a board workshop to go over VOPH and Connected City to talk about development and where we're at with it.
So
But
are
things
you
got
intending
delayed.
to do both at the same time?
Mr. Vermillion is
The
probably.
only reason I asked that
spearheading
is
so-
because VOPH has their own planning group.
Okay, sure.
That wants to be part of the VOPH.
And we'll have to split it up for that reason, sure.
Okay.
Well, we will be splitting it up, yes. They're both very large projects in their own right.
Well, I'll just ask.
Sure.
Since the VOPH Policy and Planning Committee asked to be part of the workshop on VOPH,
Mhm.
have you thought about whether you should invite the Planning Commission to be part of the workshop for Connected City?
In that they're all shaking their head yes?
Yes.
Yeah, we'd like to see that.
Yes, we will.
Then the answer is probably yes, we'll probably invite them.
Probably?
We will definitely invite them.
Makes planning a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, I'll make a motion
Before,
to continue.
before you move on, I'm sorry. I did wanted to address the one lady, I think she stepped out. But she asked the question about student generation, with the 380 multifamily, and how can it only be 77 students? So I just wanted to respond to that because I get called by principals all the time. Hey, this huge apartment complex is going up next door to my school. I'm gonna have 300 students coming out of there. And I'm like, no, you are not. Let me explain. So we do have student generation rates. We don't make up those numbers. We have, and we actually update it and every time we do the impact fees. So we do a study of all the apartment complexes, how many students live in them, how many, and we figure out, okay, if they're gonna build 400 apartments, how many students would we expect? So that is what that number is based on, and actually while we're sitting here, I pulled 3 projects in the Wesley Chapel area. So Bonterra down by Northwood has 264 apartments. There are 56 K through 12 students in there. Delano, I don't remember where that is, but that's kind of the Seven Oaks area, I believe, 288 apartments, that's 58 students. Colonial Grand, 318 apartments, that's about 65 students. So,
And that's across all grades?
yes,
From K
it's
to
across
K-12.
all grades. I can tell you how many elementary, middle, and high
So
that makes
I will
up.
also say that we get the same question on impact fees.
Yes.
Which is Chris's, why is it that the multifamily fee is so much lower than the
Right.
single family? It's because of the student
Yes.
generation. But it also makes sense to me because as somebody who one time lived in an apartment, it was when I
Yes.
was single,
Mhm.
didn't have children.
Yes.
And then apartments tend to also have those that are retired and they're
Right.
they don't want maintenance of their homes anymore. And so I can see why a single family detached home is going to have higher
Generation rate.
student generation.
Yes.
It makes sense logically.
Yeah. And
So, I don't want to get into debate all of this. This is townhomes shown on this plan. Are townhomes any different than apartments in your numbers? Are those like separated out or treated differently?
So we used to, and David's familiar with this too, when we just redid our impact fees, we do break them out. But with our more recent impact fee study, we went ahead and combined them because I believe the county tends to, we had that discussion about
Well, I know that-
multifamily versus townhome.
I know the county, so the county classifies townhomes as multifamily development, but townhomes are generally fee simple ownership. And I have no idea, I don't live in a townhome and I don't want to live in a townhome. I have no idea whether more families live in townhomes than apartments or vice versa.
But I will tell you, I mean, looking for, these are not our newest student generation rates, but the previous set of student generation rates. For example, multifamily was generating 0.235 or roughly 24 students per 100, and townhomes were generating about 16 or 17.
So actually less.
So, yeah, a little bit less than townhomes, but similar. So we went ahead this time when we redid our impact fees and just combined those.
If I could explain that sort of in general common sense terms, I mean, as a general rule, townhomes tend to be starter, starter homes or the first move up out of the apartment into the townhome. Typically, many times they don't have the family established at that point. So then when they have a family, they outgrow the townhome and now they need to be in the single family home. So his data makes sense to me.
Yes.
All right, and I guess one more thing, because we did get really bogged down on this binding concept plan topic. I did see reference in here to, as far as conversion, and there is a limitation, they're not able to convert from from office to residential. If they do convert from residential to office, I didn't see, is there an equivalency matrix or some kind of conversion rate that needs to be part of the package?
So there was a condition written that basically maxes out at 194 total trips for the development, but I've already talked to the applicant about a loom and making that clear, so we can have that as well prior to the next hearing to make it a little bit clearer for everyone in the conversion rates.
Very good.
Okay. All right, I'll go back to my motion to continue. PC2 to the 12/12 Dade City meeting.
I'll second that.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, just one to the applicant, I'd say what I'm looking at too, when we do see this again, just looking at this, this one's obviously got more wetland and floodplain impact than a lot that we see. Just looking at our conditions for evaluating and reviewing rezoning, I think some more discussion on, I'm looking at item 9, whether the property is rezoned, could be developed in a manner which would comply with other regulations, just some discussion on plans there. Whether the portion of the property are suitable for development, being that it's all floodplain, so I think there's some.
So I was about to make the same point as you. I agree with you. Shelley, I think next time you need to bring your engineer, I think we need to see some expert testimony about how you're going to, I recognize that you got up and said that you think you can permit all of these impacts, but with all due respect, you're not an engineer, you're an attorney. So I think we need some expert testimony to support that position.
Yeah, and for me, I'm looking, just to give you numbers so you can look, we can have to read them, but our evaluation criteria is under 402.1, number 9, 12, 15, 16. I think we need to see some of the engineering expert testimony would be good, because as I don't see how it's developable at that density to not impact the floodplain. It's just not.
Okay. Chris, anything else?
Nope.
Okay. So motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Continue to 12/12/24. Anything else? I think that's all for the agenda. Motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Everybody makes the motion.
That's right. Good question.
Robert's rules went out the window.
Waterways and wildlife depend on you to keep them healthy. Excess fertilizer, grass clippings, trash, oils, and pet waste wash into gutters and storm drains when it rains. Stormwater carries these pollutants directly into our lakes and rivers, creating an unhealthy environment for fish, waterfowl, and other aquatic animals. Storm drains are meant for clean rainwater. Most other discharges are illegal. If you suspect an illicit discharge, please contact Pasco County Department of Public Works at 727-834-3611.
Attention all dogs and cats. Did you know you need a pet license to live in Pasco County? That's right. If you are 4 months or older, you need to be licensed. But don't worry, there are so many easy ways your owner can get your tag. You can purchase one from your local veterinarian. You can grab a tag online, order by mail, or schedule an appointment to visit Pasco County Animal Services. And getting a pet license is very simple. You only need 2 things to get it done: a current rabies vaccination and a small license fee. Still have questions? That's okay, we're here to help. For more on how to purchase your tag, what items you need to get one, and the fees, just have your owner visit mypasco.net/PAS.
The average shelter return to owner rate for cats is less than 2%. That means if you bring a community cat to our shelter, it's not likely they'll end up being returned to their caregivers. Cats in our communities often have 1 or more caregivers, and they usually hang out in their home area. The best thing to do for these cats is to leave them be. Share that message and you too can help battle pet overpopulation.
If you're concerned the kittens have really been orphaned, meaning they haven't been moved, or you're sure mom hasn't been back in at least 8 consecutive hours, then you can step in and care for the kittens. Animal Services offers resources on our website about kitten fostering, spay and neuter services, trap rentals, and vaccinations. Whether you have a single community cat or a bunch of kitties, we encourage you to contact us at 813-929-1212 or through our website for more information on our SNP, Trap, Neuter, Vaccinate, Release program. This means healthier and fewer community cats in your neighborhood. Healthier because we can prevent diseases like rabies, and fewer because all of the cats that we treat are also spayed and neutered. Cats are eligible for the program at 8 weeks old. Pasco County is a strong and growing community, and through our combined efforts, we can help save lives with 3 simple words. Leave them be.
Hi, I'm Kurt Browning, Pasco County Superintendent of Schools. I lead the charge to provide a world-class education for all students and to ensure each student achieves success in college, career, and life. However, achieving this success can be difficult for the student who has been removed from their home for their own protection and placed in foster care or another out-of-home placement. Alarmingly, right here in Pasco County, there are almost 1,000 abused and neglected children in the child welfare system. Children in foster care often experience multiple placements and consequently may attend several different schools in one school year, making it difficult for them to achieve academic success. What can you do? You can help by becoming a guardian ad litem volunteer. Children who have a guardian ad litem do better in school and are more likely to find a safe, permanent home sooner. To learn how you can help, call 727-834-3493 or visit herotoachild.org. Our children and their success matter to me. I am for the child. Are you?
Sharon uses Pasco County public transportation just about every day she can.
It saves my life, actually, because I'm not a person to stay home.
She rides the bus system to go to the doctor, shopping, and even into Pinellas County.
I've had a couple bus drivers say, "You get around."
PCPT continues to grow, expanding service with new buses and new routes.
West Pasco's a big town, Middle Pasco's rural, and East Pasco is small urban, which presents totally different transportation difficulties and challenges. But our drivers and the team overcome those challenges on a daily basis to make sure our customers get where they need to go on time and safely.
From professionals to retirees, PCPT buses are for everyone.
Sit there, use our free Wi-Fi, look at your phone, get some work done, call somebody, or just sit there and read a book and leave the driving to us because we'll get you where you need to go.
Nice. How you feeling? Okay, good. I like your purse.
PCPT also provides special services for those who need a little extra help with the paratransit buses.
The service is good because it's very reliable.
Alana Newman gets door-to-door service to Pasco's Senior Service Elderly Nutrition Program.
They just seem like they have a good time, and they do enjoy the service.
No matter where you are headed, frequent riders say it doesn't take long to get the hang of things.
You'll learn where those buses go, and then you can learn where to connect. And if you don't know, a bus driver, ask a bus driver. The bus drivers are always helping me.
Roughly 90,000 dogs in Pasco County create more than 5 tons of waste every year. When left on the ground, stormwater carries bacteria and nutrients from pet waste into waterways, causing algae blooms and unhealthy conditions for fish and other aquatic creatures. Polluted waters are also unsafe for swimming and recreation. Please do your part to keep Florida waters clean by disposing of your pet's waste in the trash. For more information, contact Pasco County Department of Public Works at 727